Now, last week, a significant breakthrough was achieved in the fight against Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, a second drug shown to treat patients with early symptoms, potentially delaying the disease, was approved in the US and is now set to be approved over here.
Now, we've got lots of questions, and dementia researcher and consultant neurologist Dr. Cath Mummery joins us now. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is such exciting news, isn't it? It's so exciting.
It is incredibly exciting. And the reason is we all know somebody that's got dementia. It affects all the families, so many families in the country. And yet we've had no treatments that change the course of the disease. 1 million people in this country and no treatments that change the disease. But now we have 2 treatments that show if you change the underlying disease, you can slow down the cognitive symptoms and the progression. And that's incredibly exciting. That's the beginning of a treatment era.
I'm just interested in whether, can this drug be used if you're quite far into Alzheimer's, or is it only when you start seeing signs in the beginning?
I think that's a really important question. These drugs are not for everybody. We know from the trials that these drugs have most effect early on in the course of the disease. And if you look later, we don't think they're going to have that much benefit. And then you've got to weigh up the benefit and the risk. So they'll be for people with mild disease.
OK. So the FDA, which is the American Food and Drug Administration, approved this new drug last week. Why is it so groundbreaking? What does it do?
So it does a very different thing to any of the treatments we've had previously. So in Alzheimer's disease, abnormal proteins build up in the brain and they become sticky and they start to cause cell death, and that's what causes the problems. These drugs bind to one of those abnormal proteins in the brain, amyloid, and clear it from the brain. And that's the first time that we've done that. It's the first time we've shown if we can clear it, that then leads to slowing down of those cognitive symptoms, which is brand new and very exciting. It means we can now work on building on that foundation.
Now, you've just said that it's not for everybody.
That's right.
But could you use it, like, to stop it from happening? Like, before you even have it? I'm so interested in this.
Such a good question.
Like, you might be a person who, you know, it's in your family.
Yeah. So it's the actual question that we're asking right now. So up until now, most of these drugs have been tested in people that have symptoms, that have mild Alzheimer's disease. But right now, we're using these drugs in people with a genetic form, which is very rare.
Right.
But we know when they're going to get problems, so we can treat them before they get problems and see if it stops it. And so far, the indication is perhaps it can actually slow down or delay that symptom onset. And even earlier than that, the next thing that we're looking at in research is those children that know that they've got a mutation that causes rare forms of Alzheimer's disease. We're starting to treat them 25 years before symptoms, before any of these proteins build up. So we might never cause disease, which is amazing.
So you almost, is that how it works? You almost you hope to look at it in the same way that people would take statins for heart disease, for example, in that if you know you have a predisposition, then you can get it that early. And
that's the aim.
Yeah.
That's the eventual aim. We're a long way from there at the minute. We're right at the beginning of this journey in the foothills. We need to get to the peak at the top. But this is the first step to show that that journey is possible. And that statin story is exactly right. We didn't know that statins were going to stop heart failure. When I was a junior doctor, wards were full of people with heart failure. Now it's incredibly rare because we're preventing it. And that prevention is really where we want to get to.
And so in terms of, I don't want to put you on the spot, but in terms of resources and, let's be frank, money, so is there adequate kind of resources being put into this? Because like you said at the start, it's just so widespread, so many people now will have loved ones and relatives that are going through this.
If you think about the current memory services we have in this country, they're used to treating people in the community, and essentially it's palliative care and support and nothing else. That's a very different model from if you look at acute care with cancer or stroke or multiple sclerosis. That's in acute hospitals with a lot of resource. So we need a significant change in how we manage patients in memory services, much more medicalised, like those other diseases. So you're right, we need resource, and that's being looked at the moment. But what we need to do is be doing it now, because, as you said, these treatments are hopefully being approved in the coming weeks.
We know there's similar drugs being approved in America. When's this going to be rolled out in the UK?
So in the States, the 2 drugs are approved, donanemab just recently and lecanemab a little while ago. They're both under consideration in this country. The first thing that has to happen after trials is that the regulatory body has to give the drugs a licence. So they weigh up risk and benefit, and that's happening right now. And hopefully we will have a decision on that initial bit by the end of the month. We'll see. No promises, but hopefully. Then NICE in England look at cost and benefit and weigh those things up. We don't know when that's going to be, but we're really hoping it's going to be in the next few months, so soon.
That is a tough decision for NICE, isn't it?
It's
because
the
we have a
first time they've ever made
finite
that
amount
decision,
of resources, and they have to work out, you know, if they can afford it, I suppose. So what are we looking at here? Is this a pill? Is this a intravenous? How does the drug kind of work?
And again, it's not going to be for everybody because of the way they're given. So both drugs are given intravenously at the moment, and that's an infusion for lecanemab once every 2 weeks, for donanemab once every 4 weeks. Both companies and other companies are looking to make it easier to give people a self-injection, so subcut injection, which would decrease the cost and decrease the burden. But right now, you'd have to go to hospital every 2 weeks to get your infusion.
Yeah. It is incredible, isn't it? Like we were talking during the break, just how quickly medicine and science can work. I mean, you know, our generation is the generation that's lived through HIV. And when we were kids, you know, we remember seeing the TV adverts. It was like, you know, it was a death sentence, especially for our friends that were gay. It was terrifying, right? And now, look where we are with that. Do you envisage the same world, and we talked about heart disease, do you envisage the same world within a generation with Alzheimer's? That we don't look at
We don't know, but I really hope so. I guess there's really important lessons from things like HIV. At that point, when we were watching it emerge in the 80s, the stigma was massive.
Yes, I remember.
And therefore, people didn't get diagnosed because they were frightened of it. Same thing with dementia, to some extent. It's improved a bit, but it's still a problem. Treatments and the starter treatments bring people forwards because there's more hope and you can get more treatment and also make them think about prevention rather than treatment. In terms of where we go with the future treatments, there are 144 different drugs in the pipeline right now. And those are not just like this one. There's lots of different targets, lots of different mechanisms. And so I think we'll be like MS was 10, 15 years ago. We'll have multiple treatments we can use in combination in about 10, 15 years. And that's only going to improve and increase the benefit.
Oh, my gosh, it's so amazing
really
for scientists,
exciting.
doctors. It's so exciting for everybody.
It's the beginning of a new era,
It really is. Are there any drugs about to break through here in the UK that I need to know? British drugs about to break through?
All of these drugs tend to be tested globally. But, I mean, these 2 drugs we've talked about. There are then drugs that deal with other proteins in the brain and also inflammation in the brain. And some of those in the next few years will be coming through. And some of those are genetic therapies, which have a completely different way of stopping production of the proteins in the first place so it can never cause the damage. So I think that's where there's real excitement in terms of not just slowing things down a bit, but really changing the course of the disease.
And this is a bit of a big picture question, but these, obviously medical bodies probably work together kind of, you know, cross-country wise. But we also know, you know, big pharma is big pharma, right? So they're kind of competing against each other. So do people share research on this for the common good or not?
That's really, really important. And nobody has done that in the past. And it's an increasingly a requirement now. When somebody gets a grant, when somebody does research, they're required to share their data. For that very reason, because it used to be competition rather than collaboration. And we have to get to a point in research and in clinical where people are building that common knowledge, because it will only accelerate things.
Sure, as a species.
Cath, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
That was so interesting.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
Very exciting research.